And joining us now in Washington is Tanvi Madan. She's the director of the India project at Brookings Institution. And in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the Asia Times roving correspondent and a veteran Brazilian journalist, Pepe Escobar. Pepe, let me begin with you. I want to start with China's President Xi Jinping's comments as he announced the new development bank. Let's listen.
Under the efforts from all parties, today we reached a consensus on building the development bank. This is a major step for cooperation of BRICS countries. The achievement shows BRICS countries' willingness to work together and move forward. The achievement not only raises the speaking rights of BRICS countries in dealing with global issues, but also benefits us and all people from developing countries.
So, Pepe, you had said the establishment of this bank is absolutely essential. Why?
It's absolutely essential, and it's, I would say, it's the slow beginning of the slow end of the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement and the Washington Consensus. It's very important to know that all over the global South, in Africa, in South America, in Southeast Asia, in India, China, Russia, Central Asia, people can't stand anymore this domination of the Western financial mechanism, which has degenerated into, I would say, a racket. This is how the IMF and the World Bank work or don't work on a global basis. Just to give you an example, do you know that in Africa, the Brazilian Development Bank, which, by the way, is the model for the new development bank adopted by the BRICS, they give more loans than the World Bank itself based in Washington. So, you know, it's absolutely pointless. We need multilateral development banks all over the world because the global needs in terms of infrastructure development and investment especially, it's $1 trillion a year. So this, you could say this is a pebble in the ocean, the new development bank, but it's extremely welcome.
All right, Tanvi, what do you think?
I think the way the Indians are looking at it is, yes, it's a landmark agreement for the reasons that President Xi Jinping said. It's a way for these 5 countries to cooperate in a way that hasn't happened before. It's also going to provide an opportunity to a number of countries looking for such financing. The second way that I think India sees this as being beneficial is because it's seen as giving India specifically, but these countries, greater voice and weight on the global stage. They see this as a supplement to the existing financial architecture, but they don't see it as a replacement. They do see it, this new bank, as a way to signal that they would like a more representative international financial architecture and a greater voice in the existing institutions.
The 5 BRICS countries represent almost 3 billion people, about 40% of the world, with a combined GDP of 16 trillion US dollars last year. Now, Tanvi, do you agree that the establishment of this bank makes economic sense?
I think that partly depends on how it functions in the future. We've seen the form it's taken. One of the things that, for example, you've seen India and Brazil emphasize is that this is one country, one vote, and the equity. In the functioning, however, we'll have to see, will this equity be maintained over the next 5 to 10 years, depend from the time it's established? Will the kind of projects that are being financed are the same ones that they seem to have envisioned? Will one country dominate the decision-making on the bank, or the way that they've separated out the headquarters, the chairmanship of the board, the membership of the board, as well as the regional offices and the location of the headquarters? Is this going to be equity that is not going to necessarily lead to effectiveness? That's something we'll have to watch. I have a feeling you'll see some criticism from some observers saying, already calling into question that this will work, but I think we have to wait and see. I think it's too early to tell. We'll have to see. Many people didn't think this would happen in the first place. We've clearly seen it formed. Now let's see about the functioning.
So Pepe, Tanvi brings up a good point, the whole issue of equality and equity among these countries. How are they going to figure that out? Will they all have equal role?
Yes, they will. In fact, the internal decision mechanism in the BRICS, it strikes me as very democratic, in fact. Like, you know, like the headquarters for the bank. India proposed Mumbai, Brazil was pushing Sao Paulo, the Chinese were pushing Shanghai, and they all agreed that the financial capital of Asia, or Eurasia for the future, is going to be Shanghai. So it's very well positioned. And in the end, everybody agreed. It's an internal mechanism of these, especially these three leaders, Putin, President Xi, and Dilma. They have been talking in close consultation for a while now. They understand priorities very well. They are welcome PM Modi to the group. And this is Modi's debut in the international arena. It has been very good for him. He's learning from these leaders who have much more experience in the international arena as he has. And in fact, he got a sort of endorsement of the expansion of the UN Security Council, which is an Indian priority. And he reciprocated. He said, look, I want all of us at the BRICS and let's say the BRIC aggregates in the future, Argentina, Iran, Indonesia, South Korea, Turkey, these are all candidates to be part of the BRICS as well, to have a real voice in international affairs and really building with facts on the ground and economic and financial facts a real multipolar world. So if you look at what President Xi, Putin, Modi, and Dilma have been saying since yesterday, everybody's on the same wavelength, everybody's in sync. Everybody knows as well that for the global south, this is the beginning of a very long and complex process, but it's towards a multipolar world. It's against casino capitalism as is being practiced nowadays by the Western hegemonic elites, in fact.
So Tanvi was shaking her head at some point. Why were you shaking your head?
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think there was as much the countries being in sync. This was hard work getting to this point. Till last week, there wasn't confirmation that this was going to be formed, partly because of the differences among the countries in terms of their vision of the bank.
And what are some of those differences?
And also, a couple of them, for example. Brazil and India were quite specific that there would be no bank if there was no one country, one vote. That is not something China was on board with in the beginning, but they basically came on board that front. In terms of equitable contributions, initially it looked like China would be providing a lot more of the contribution than the other countries. That was agreed upon. The location, India was very much pushing for it to be in the headquarters to be in Mumbai. Eventually, from what we're hearing in terms of reports, that Brazil agreed to give up the presidency to India so that they could find a consensus. So reaching that consensus wasn't easy, and some of the same differences that existed in the lead up, we'll have to see how they play out in the future. I'd say the other thing that I have a slight difference with what Pepe said is that I don't think India will see the statement in the BRICS declaration this time as any different from the last three UN Security Council reform sections in the other declarations. Since 2011, if you go back and look at each of the BRICS declarations, it's pretty much had the same language on UN Security Council reform, which is China and Russia recognizing the need for reform, but falling short of actually endorsing seats for the other three countries involved.
Well, let's listen to a statement made by India's Prime Minister Modi. He talks about some of the goals for BRICS, and then I'll get your reaction afterwards.
We must seek urgent reforms of global institutions of governance like the UN Security Council and international financial institutions. We must help shape the WTO regime. An open trading regime is critical for strong, balanced, and sustainable global economic growth.
Pepe, did you agree with the Prime Minister had to say?
Yes, I do agree, but there's a lot of maybes and ifs and conditionalities. To a certain extent, especially India and Brazil, they are still protectionist countries in many different senses. So they will have to, in terms of an open trade regime all over the world and being discussed at the WTO, I agree. But the WTO mechanisms of evaluating protectionism, they have to be upgraded as well. So yes, I'm more interested, in fact, in the long run, in how the BRICS and the countries that may join the BRICS in the future are going to help to industrialize Africa, in fact. because the weak partner in international relations, as we all know, is Africa. Brazil is very much present in African investment. India, in parts of Africa as well. China, all over the place, in over 30, 35 countries. But they could help via the bank to accelerate industrialization of Africa. So this, I think this is the overarching theme in the near future for the bank. If they succeed in doing that over the next 5 to 10 years, I would say the bank is going to be a huge success, unlike the World Bank in the past few years.
Tanvi, India and China have sparred over territorial disputes in the past. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Modi met with China's President Xi Jinping to discuss the border dispute and the need for more involvement in India's infrastructure. Does BRICS make these types of conversations more likely to succeed?
I think it gives these countries an opportunity to talk about to meet, for example, on a much more frequent basis. Otherwise, summits between Indian and Chinese leaders still happen quite rarely. President Xi Jinping is scheduled to go to India, possibly in September or slightly later, and so there will be another opportunity then. But it does give these countries, I think, not just with China, but for example, going back to the question of Africa, the fact that the Indian leader who's just taken office gets a chance to engage with the South African leader as well as the Brazilian leader, and these visits might not otherwise kind of be on the priority list. It also makes some of these issues, puts them in context in the sense that it adds to the cooperative side of the relationship, while recognizing that there are all these conflictual and competitive elements. It does give a kind of a forum for these countries to, in private and sometimes public sessions, discuss what's good and bad, and not kind of shirk the responsibility of talking about differences and dealing with them, but saying we are grown-ups, we can talk about them, but we can also cooperate.
All right. Tanvi Madan, Pepe Escobar, thank you so much.